You just won something. Maybe it was small, a promotion, a good review, a deal that finally closed after months of back and forth. For a couple of seconds, you feel it, a warm certainty. You did that. You're good at this. You know exactly what you're doing, and for once, nobody in the room is arguing with you. But the real answer is far stranger than confidence. What you're feeling right now is the first move in a pattern that has quietly destroyed companies, careers, and reputations for as long as humans have kept records of any of it. And it begins in the place you'd least expect. Not at the moment of failure, at the moment you start winning. Here's the strange part. Success doesn't just reward you, it changes the way your brain processes information. And it does it in a way that makes you worse at the exact thing that made you successful. In 1999, two psychologists at Cornell University, David Dunning and Justin Kruger, ran a series of experiments that would later be named after them. They tested people on logic, grammar, even humor. Then they asked each person to guess how well they had done. The pattern was strange. The people who scored the lowest believed they had done the best. Not slightly better, significantly. Why? Because the same skills you need to be good at something are the skills you need to recognize that you're bad at it. If you don't have them yet, you can't see the gap. You're not just wrong. You don't know you're wrong. And somehow you feel great about it. But here's what almost nobody talks about. This isn't only a beginner's problem. It comes back later in a far more dangerous form. It comes back for the people who are already good. Because the moment you succeed, a new problem quietly appears. You stop asking the question that made you successful in the first place. Daniel Kahneman, the psychologist who won a Nobel Prize for showing how flawed human judgment really is, spent decades studying one specific error: overconfidence. Not the overconfidence of people who know nothing, the overconfidence of people who know a lot and have been right before. Kahneman found that success quietly recalibrates your sense of your own accuracy. Every win gets filed as evidence. Evidence that you were right. Evidence that your instincts work. Evidence that you don't need to check anymore. So what happens when the instincts that made you a winner stop matching the situation you're actually in? You don't notice. That's the whole problem. You don't notice, because noticing requires exactly the kind of self-doubt that winning just taught your brain to switch off. This isn't just a psychological curiosity. It has a name in business research too. Danny Miller, a management professor who studied dozens of once dominant companies, called it the Icarus paradox. Miller found something almost every collapsed giant had in common. The very strategy that made the company great was almost always the same strategy that later destroyed it. Not because the market suddenly changed, because the company kept doing what used to work for far longer than it worked, never once noticing the shift. Take Kodak. Kodak didn't collapse because it missed digital photography. Kodak's own engineers built one of the first digital cameras back in the 1970s. Kodak collapsed because film made it a giant, and the instinct that built the empire refused to let go of the very thing that was quietly killing it. The tool that saved the company for 100 years turned out to be the tool that buried it. Or take Blockbuster. At its peak, Blockbuster had thousands of stores and a business model built entirely around one thing: late fees. That model made the company enormous money for years. So when a small mail-order company called Netflix offered to sell itself to Blockbuster for a fraction of what Blockbuster was worth, Blockbuster's leadership walked away laughing. Why buy your way out of the model that made you rich? The same instinct that built the empire looked directly at its own replacement and waved it off, because that instinct had never been wrong before. The name Icarus comes from an old myth. A man is given wings of feathers and wax and told one simple rule: don't fly too close to the sun. He flies anyway. Not out of stupidity. Out of the confidence the wings themselves gave him. Confidence here isn't the opposite of danger. It's the delivery system. This didn't start with tech companies or sports teams. It's old, genuinely old. Napoleon was nearly unbeatable for more than a decade. Army after army, country after country, the same aggressive strategy kept working and kept getting called genius. Then he pointed that same strategy at Russia in the same style, at the same speed, expecting the same result. The winters, the distances, the supply lines, everything had changed. The strategy hadn't. Historians still point to that campaign as one of the clearest examples in history of a winning formula applied one time too many by a man who had never once had to ask himself whether it still fit. Zoom out far enough and the pattern becomes almost eerie. Empires rarely collapse at their weakest moment. They usually collapse just past the peak of their strength, still running the same formula that got them there, just a little longer than the world beneath them had already moved. And here's the twist. You'd assume the danger zone is failure, the mistake, the loss. But the real danger zone is the opposite. It's an unbroken streak of wins. Because failure makes you ask a question. Success makes you draw a conclusion. When you lose, your brain practically begs you to ask what happened. When you win, your brain closes the case. Question settled. Theory confirmed. Move on. And the bigger the win, the harder that case slams shut. Because now there's an audience. People telling you that you're right. People your instincts once helped, who quietly assume those instincts are permanent. Nobody standing next to a winner wants to be the one who says, "Hold on, maybe we should check." This is exactly why the pattern repeats in almost identical shape across completely different lives. A founder scales a company on one instinct, ignores every early signal that the instinct has stopped working, and the very thing that built the company becomes the reason it breaks. An athlete rides one habit into a championship, refuses to adjust it while everyone else catches up, and the habit that made them great becomes the reason they're the last to notice they've fallen behind. Notice something about all of these stories. The person isn't beaten by a rival. They're beaten by an earlier version of themselves that simply stopped updating. So what actually breaks the cycle? Not humility as a personality trait people are born with. Timing. The moment you can honestly question your instincts is before you've been proven right, not after. Once the wins stack up, the psychological cost of doubting yourself gets too high. Too many people depend on the story that you're right, including you. This is why the rare people who escape the pattern all do the same slightly unnatural thing. They go looking for the flaw while they're still winning. Not when a critic finally points at it. Not when the numbers finally drop. While everything still looks fine from the outside. It feels almost self-destructive. Why hunt for a problem that isn't there yet? Because it's always there. You just can't see it yet. And the moment you'll finally be able to see it clearly is the exact moment you'll have the least motivation and the least social permission to look. Think about the last time you were completely sure of something. Not just confident. Certain. Did that certainty come from evidence you had recently checked? Or did it come from a version of you that was right once, a while ago, and has been quietly coasting on that proof ever since? You probably didn't build your worst habit today. If you have one, there's a good chance you built it during a win, a long stretch when things were going well, and it's been sitting there invisible ever since, hiding behind the results it used to produce. This isn't a story about a handful of unlucky founders or overconfident athletes. It's a story about a switch that exists in every human brain, one that gets flipped by success itself, quietly, without asking permission. You don't need power or money or an audience for it to activate. You only need one thing to go right often enough that you stop asking why. Ask yourself where this is already running in your own life. The work you stopped double-checking because you've always been good at it. The relationship pattern you stopped examining because it worked before. The plan you're following right now, not because you recently tested it, but because a version of you tested it once, years ago, and nobody has looked at it since. It shows up in the small things too. The way you talk to people once you're the one in charge of the room. The way feedback starts sounding like noise instead of information the moment enough people agree with you. The way a habit that once took real effort to build quietly turns into something you defend instead of study. Even your body runs a version of this. Ask anyone who trained hard enough and long enough to stop noticing the small pain that was trying to warn them early. By the time it's impossible to ignore, it's rarely small. The warning was there for months. Beating your own limits over and over is exactly what taught you not to listen to it. None of this means you should distrust every good decision you've ever made. Most of them are probably fine. That's part of the trap. Most decisions built on old confidence are fine, right up until the one that quietly isn't. And by then the habit of not checking is years deep. Here's what should actually unsettle you. Everyone prepares for failure. Nobody prepares for winning. You just won something.